welcome back to the Apatros review. In this episode, Bounty Tracker. Now, welcome back. In this episode, I've decided to do something a little different with my choice of review. I normally don't take requests since I have a strict order and schedule that I follow, and I've already booked out the entire schedule for the 2020 season for this show so far. But I did get a request from a fan who wanted me to review Bounty Tracker. As I've said already, I don't normally do requests, but I have had the Australian DVD release of Bounty Tracker a few years ago. It was one of the many films released by RAAM Multimedia, and I gave my copy away long ago, but I still remember enough of the film and had a time written a practice review for my archive, so I didn't have to remember too much for the review to work. So I dug up my old review and went over it. And if I still had the disc, it would have been reviewed at this point in time anyway. So if the fan out there who requested it, consider yourself lucky because this review is for you. Next time, just ask me if I have a particular film and I'll get back to you on that. Anyway, let's get started, shall we? Now, Bounty Tracker was a 1992 direct-to-video action film directed by Kurt Anderson, and it's a Canadian film. Now for the story. Johnny Damone, played by Lorenzo Lamas, a bounty tracker from Boston, arrives in California to visit his brother Paul. But once he arrives, he finds a heavy police presence around Paul's house. Finally allowed in, Johnny discovers that Paul is the only surviving witness to a gangster's money laundering scheme, and that his entire workplace of accountants have been massacred by an elite team of assassins. That night, the assassins, led by Eric Gauss, played by Matthias Hughes, breach a police guard and kill Paul and his wife, along with their police protection detail. Only Johnny survives, and he happens to have wounded one of the assassins. Determined to avenge the deaths of his brother and sister-in-law, Johnny uses his skip-tracing skills to track down Gauss and his gang and bring them down. Like I mentioned, Bounty Tracker is the early 1990s B-grade action thriller from Image Organization, one of Canada's most prolific B-budget film studios for much of the early 1990s. They handled everything from cheap action films to the majority of the Scanners sequels. I'll review all the Scanners films one day as well. Bounty Tracker, which has something of a pull amongst fans of B-film veteran Lorenzo Lamas, and I'll be reviewing some of his other films in the future, so watch this space, is rather unexceptional in most respects, or for certainly not a slouch in the action department, B-grade direct-to-video action thriller on almost all counts. But it is elevated to passable, so it's reasonably enjoyable because of all the cool action scenes it has. The action consists of numerous decently staged shootouts, hand-to-hand combat, and an amusing fight scene where Lorenzo Lamas demolishes his way through an Indonesian martial arts dojo. That's pretty cool to watch. The story is your standard revenge plot that has filled the requirement for many a cheap B film over the ages, and Lorenzo Lamas, who has starred in numerous cheap B films in the 1990s, even directing one film for PM Entertainment, before heading way downhill in the 2000s with some sci-fi schlock like Deep Evil and diabolically inept but hilarious to watch Unseen Evil 2. Sensing a few of the titles here? Does his best with the material and actually has some fun to stand the hero's role. The closest the film gets to being original is the lead up to the climax where Lamas and a gang of hoods, trying to avenge the death of their teacher, track down the villain's hideout by having one of their hoods hiding inside the trunk of the bad guy's car and a walkie-talkie to tell him which turn the car makes. Other than that, this is straight-up B-grade direct-to-video action from the early 1980s. Man, I miss those happy days. Although for the first half of 1992, I was personally living in Yugoslavia before my return to Australia later that same year. On the side of the bad guys, Matthias Hughes does pretty well and shows off his fighting skills and style, while well covered by Cindy Pass's second-in-command in the gang of assassins, both of whom also appear in another film called Mission of Justice, and I'll cover that one as well. The film is a modestly passable action hokum, which Lamas fans love. That's fine with me considering the direct Lamas made in the 2000s. So it's pretty passable. Like I said, decent action scenes, a solid story, well, standard, but solid, robust enough, and it's pretty fun to watch. Not fully solid, but just passable. Now for the gore. Plenty of bullet holes and broken limbs offer nowhere near the level that somebody like Steven Seagal would manage to do in his heyday. Lamas is pretty good with his fighting skills. Now, there's no nudity in this either, although it has been a while since I last saw it. I'm pretty much running the fumes of my memory here. I may have overlooked that. There is a strip in one scene of military-style G-string, so that might count. Now, while this is certainly better than its 2000s work, I have to give this Lamas film a C+, which is a 5 out of 10 rating. That means it's a passable direct-to-video action flick. Most action fans will like this flick for the decent action scenes and sturdy story. For Lorenzo Lamas fans, this will be a great guilty pleasure. Now for the DVD. This was another of the plenty of cheap $2 DVDs that Paylor's short-lived but very prolific subsidiary RAAM Multimedia issued in the early 2010s. I picked up my copy in Liverpool with several other titles. As far as I recall, the quality was pretty consistent with other titles in the RAAM catalogue, although I do remember some parts of the print a little grainy and so there being a general lack of shadow detail. But given that RAAM Multimedia usually transfers some of the films onto DVD from VHS tapes, that's pretty much a given in the expectations department. Like practically all the RAAM Multimedia discs, this has no subtitles and no supplement. And that's it for this review.